All right, everyone. Welcome to the Elevate Your Equity podcast, where investors with a special emphasis on couples begin, continue, and deepen their journey to financial freedom together using the powerful vehicle of real estate investing to do it. Today, we've got Edmund Chien on the call. How are you today, Edmund?
I'm doing great. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, first, let's start off with your story. So how did you get involved in real estate investing? And tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I guess when I started in real estate investing, I started out very similar to a lot of folks that you've probably talked to back in the late 90s. In fact, I was serving in the military, and I was a airborne paratrooper. And I was getting some income, and I had a suspicion that learning about investing early had something to do with success. And if I was going to figure it out, it's better to learn it too early than too late. So I just kind of started reading everything I could read about investing. And of course, I came across what many people call the Purple Bible, which is Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And here I am in an army barracks reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad and starting to come to the conclusion, you know what? I wanted to get into cash flow investing and real estate. And I'm gonna drill down even further because it looks like one of the secrets to success. And that's when it really started my journey to really educate myself and learn a lot about that and decide, you know what, I want to head down that direction.
Fantastic. And what was so specific about real estate when you were reading that book that inspired you, if you don't mind us asking?
I think parts of it, I think what Robert does is he makes it sound like an idiot could do it. And, I took a look in the mirror. It's like, well, like I'm probably pretty idiotic. So if an idiot can do it, then maybe it's right up my alley. And I didn't get into it. Like, I wasn't a finance guy. That wasn't my degree. And my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, she was in finance. So part of the journey is that what your podcast is talking about is the importance of couples and the journey to approach it with a couple. And I wanted to run it by my wife to say that, is this something that you think that you could really be into as well? And I was kind of curious as well. Do you learn this in your Bachelor of Commerce? Do they go through any of this stuff? She said no. I said, well, maybe there's something here. And I was trying to encourage her to, let's try to pursue this in our own investment strategy. What do you think? And trying to work it out with her.
That's fantastic. Really cool. So can you explain a little bit about those conversations? How, when you guys started in the journey, what was the conversation like? Did you kind of come in with the juice and say, hey, this is really cool stuff. I just read this book. I'm really enthusiastic about this. Let's jump in. Or, can you give us some background as to how that whole conversation happened?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a big advocate of really strong marriages, and I think that's an important component of our society. And taking a look at the broader picture, you take a look, the odds are almost against you. It's like 50-50, if not higher, the success rate of marriages. And for me, as we were entering into our relationship and into our marriage, I was kind of curious, is like, what significance, as I was starting to read more, what significance does finance have in a strong marriage? And at the time, there was a series called "Till Death Do Us Part," and what I think it's Gail Vaz Oxley, and she has this reality show, and she's talking about that the number one cause, or she argues that the number one cause of marital breakdown, or at least a big contributor to that, is financial instability. One person they're not on the same page financially. So I recognize, you know what, if I wanted to be the leader of a household or a strong position in the household, I really need to make sure that both my wife and I are on the same page. She's a lot better educated than I. She's formally educated in finance. So I was, you know what? So maybe this would be an easy discussion. And we started working in on, and I was a salesperson, right? So it's just like the first person I got to sell is my wife. If I can't sell my wife on why real estate, then how am I ever going to be able to sell it to anybody else?
I'm so intrigued, and I'm so glad you brought that up, Edmund, because yeah, you're so right. Like, couples need to be on the same page financially, and then also in terms of growth, right? And growth trajectory. I'm curious, like, what do you guys do? Or, can you give our listeners any advice on the couples who maybe are just starting out and they're not necessarily on the same page, but, they're interested in starting those conversations? What advice might you have for them?
So to sort of fast forward to the end of my story, my finance story, what I ended up doing is I became a licensed stockbroker or financial advisor for accredited investors, or what we call wealthy investors, all the way up to and including a family office. And one of the number one things I would start off with as a foundation for my clients is marital stability. I'd taken a couple of clients through divorces, and it is financially devastating. And I've also seen the emotional toll that it takes on the individual. So one of the lessons I teach people is that it's well worth your while to make sure that you guys are on the same page from the financial aspect, at least. And the emotional side, that's kind of on you. But for me, I'm one of your advisors for the financial component. So what I did as an offering, especially when you get to white glove service, when you get to family office, it's a lot of those components to say, like, if somebody says, but my spouse doesn't do this, or my spouse spends way too much money, or my spouse X and Y, and then I tell them, let me be the bad guy. So you've hired me as your financial planner, and I will go in and tell me all the things that you're worried about your spouse. Tell it to me, and then I will go and sit down with your spouse, both sides. Right. And then I would go and talk to the other spouse, and the spouse would, well, my husband or my wife doesn't do this. And I would translate and go back and forth, and try to help them see eye to eye. And that was one of the services that I felt that I was doing as a financial advisor for my clients. Because what I try to do is, as a money manager, it's my responsibility to have principal preservation. And divorce is one of the most destructive things that it can be for that couple, aside from the moral aspects of things, which I truly believe in, which is I'm a big advocate of really strong marriages. So if I could be in a vertical that has a significant impact on the effect of their marriage, why wouldn't I participate? And that sort of differentiates me as a financial advisor.
So, Edmund, when you spent many years doing this with couples, right, or with just individuals, what was a common hangup that you would see? Like, is there something that maybe our listeners can take away to watch out for as far as pitfalls go in during this discussion from your years of experience?
Yeah, I would say that one of the biggest challenges I would come across is unequally yoked people from a financial aspect. So the cliche would be somebody like a business owner, and he's been running his business for 20 years, a little overbearing because they're used to bringing, like, just really growing that business and being successful at it. But then he has a wife at home, and he just tells her, I'll pay the bills, I'll handle all the finances. And the wife just goes and looks after the kids, and that's it. And when I see that dynamic, I would explain to that husband, I would come in and I'd say, what happens when you're not around? Then when you're gone, she's completely at a loss. And it's going to be like drinking from a fire hose, and it's going to be incredibly overwhelming. And when that happens, that's putting your risk, or it's putting your financial legacy at risk. And all this effort that you're putting into it, wouldn't it be far better to train her over time and let her drink slowly? And he's like, well, I don't have the patience to do that. It's like, well, I do. And so, well, why would you do that? It's because when you're gone, if I try to explain things to her, she becomes a nightmare client, because I have to teach her 20 years or 10 years worth of financial planning and make wise decisions in the course of a week. I would rather, it's in my best interest to do it over time as well. So it's a win-win. It's a win for me, because if you're gone, your portfolio, your family portfolio is still good. It's a win for you because your legacy is still strong. You have kids. Don't you want those kids to have a financially savvy person running the operation? And it's not always going to be you, right? And those are some of the discussions I would have to sort of change the thinking of my clients. And I think it's incredibly important.
Yeah, Edmund. Now, when you see these conversations happening, did you see a correlation between those couples that actually were on the same page, or at least, the non-involved spouse have some sort of education or some sort of interest? Did you see any kind of correlation between that communication leading to financial performance, or maybe harmonious marriages? Or, like, is there anything that you can draw from there in terms of indicators that our listeners can use for what a healthy marriage and a healthy foundation from a marital standpoint would be?
So from the financial services perspective, as a money manager, we have risk profiles. And the less a client knows, and for me, the client is the household. So the less a client knows, the higher the risk profile goes, because that means that there's more fiduciary responsibility on me. So for instance, if there's a client that, and I had a lottery winner, for an example, right? $25 million lottery winner, not financially savvy. And if they came in and they said, Ed, here's the money, I don't know what, just do the best you can. That's a very high risk profile, because that's vague and they don't know what is possible. What they could be thinking, do the best you can. They might be thinking 20% return is probably what Ed could do, but that's not realistic, right? And it's way too vague. Now, if somebody is incredibly financially sophisticated, and that's what I used to tell my clients, it's in my best interest to educate you on finances, both of you, because the more educated you are, the wiser decisions you will make, and the more realistic your expectations will become. And just realize, you know what, in today's environment, post credit crisis, we're probably aiming for an average of anywhere between 5 or 6%. So if you want to get to 14, you're probably going to have to increase your investment risk, right? But at least you understand that. If the person says, here's $25 million, just get me 20% by the end of the year and we'll be happy, we'll be good. Just the average. Like, that's a really high risk profile for me, for a client.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And it's interesting to me is because we know a lot of financial planners, and I don't think any of them that we know act as marital counselors as well. And so I'm curious, can you kind of give us a backstory on what got you really, really interested in that?
I think part of it is that the higher net worth you get, and for me, what I was trying to do as a financial planner, and a lot of the training we have is we have like the quadrants, different quadrants of your value. And I think even Robert Kiyosaki talks about this too, which is you have the top northeast, you have high cost, high value, but then you have like high cost, low value, and low cost, low value, that type of stuff, those quadrants. Low cost, low value is anything at the dollar store, the throwaway stuff. And the ideal for a client, for an advisor, is building a book of business where I am high cost, but I am also high value. So that was sort of my aim to be there. Now, keep in mind, my background, my bachelor's is actually a bachelor's of fine arts in theater. So I went to theater school, right? And I went to the top theater school in Canada. It's the Canadian Juilliard. And my specialty was creating the shows. So the technical side of things. And in that environment, it's everything from opera, all the very high-end stuff. It is all black tie. It's all catering to ultra high net worth. And I didn't realize its value, its perspective, until I got into financial services. I was in a room full of a bunch of Bachelor of Commerce. So I hid the fact that I had a Bachelor of Fine Arts. But I didn't realize throughout my entire degree, I was training essentially how to provide white glove service to ultra high net worth people. And how do you give them that experience, like that 5-star experience? And I wanted to be that as an advisor, to serve people well, more than just their money. Because I think a lot of financial advisors, they just want to take a look at the numbers. How much money do you have? Thank you very much. Give it to me. I will go and crunch the numbers and stick it in just look at candlesticks and different types of charts. For me, it was more about the individual. It's more about, because money can be very emotional. What does this money mean to you? What do you want me to do with it? I want to understand your values, because I'm a right brain creative thinker. So it's more about the individual. So tell me these values. And if you could, like if you were me and I had your values, how would you want me to invest this? What are the things that are important to you? Because I want to give you that white glove service, because I want to stand out from my competitors. And when I stand out, I become high value, high cost.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I'm picking up everything that you're putting down, Edmund. This is great stuff. I wanted to ask you, let's start to back up a little bit here, because now we're getting into something that you were doing in kind of the height of your career. But I want to really more focus on, how you were serving your customers and also how you got started. So I actually met you through a real estate meetup online. And my question is, normally for most financial planners that I see, or at least the ones that I'm acquainted with, they end up going to financial planners and they don't offer real estate because they don't understand the service, or they don't understand the investment. It's hard to gauge value. There's a lot of components. It's very complicated. There's people involved. It's not like you can use numbers, crunch numbers, and then pick a stock, right? It's much more different with real estate. So can you back up and maybe talk to us about how real estate plays into the the asset management, or the family office wealth management front here? Just curious on
right. Absolutely. So my career in finance kind of goes backwards to everybody else. So I started out at the beginning in private equity, real estate for high net worth clients, in a number of ultra high net worths and some family office. And we ended up there because I continued to talk to my wife about, rich dad, poor dad. She had a finance degree, so she could get in front of different people. So I tried to encourage her, and I said, well, what if we could go and find a group that was investing in real estate, like a private equity real estate firm? And lo and behold, we came across one. And I said, well, why don't you go interview there? Why don't you try that? Because, you know, the big brokerage firms, the big banks are always going to be there. But I think there's an opportunity here and we can learn, because I was already starting to look at properties, trying to figure out, and like everybody else, I was nervous about taking my first shot. So I said, well, this would be a better opportunity to see how other people do it. So instead of paying for mentorship, we just go and work there, and then they'll have to train you on how to do it. And we'll be able to figure it out for free. And maybe they'll even pay you to do it. So wouldn't that be like 10 times better? And it's just like, yeah, that doesn't make, that sounds interesting, right? So we convinced her to go interview. Sure enough, they really liked her and they wanted to hire her, and she got the job there. Then I kind of went in and talked to her boss. And what her boss said was, he chatted with me. He wanted to get to know us. And then he said, well, you know, in order for me to teach you this stuff, you really have to be a client. And our minimum starting fee is $3,000 a year, right? And you have to have $1 million in net worth. You have to be a accredited investor. So unless you're that, I can't really teach you. So I said to him, I was like, well, could I come work here? Because I'm ex-military, or I'm in the military right now. And he said, well, I'm also ex-military too. And I can take a look at your resume, and I immediately know, like, if you're teaching boot camps, I know that you're teachable, you're disciplined, and you can teach other people everything you've learned. So I would love to have a person like you on staff. And you haven't been trained by Bachelor of Commerce in stocks and all those types, and they have this fallacy of how the industry works, because private equity is a completely different ballgame. So you don't have that bias. So I would love to have a clean slate like you with that discipline. If you're willing to come and work the phones and start off as a cold caller, then I'll be happy to bring on staff. And I figured, you know what, most people don't want to be a cold caller. But for me, I was thinking it more like, if all I have to do is push buttons on the phone, I get free advice where I normally have to pay $3,000, and I don't have to bring the $1 million, and then I can just sit and listen and what's going on. So that's not that bad of a cost if I have to cold call. So I accepted it, and that's where I started.
So can you tell me, I know you touched on this briefly during your story about the person that was looking to hire you was also ex-military. By the way, thank you for your service. We can't thank our military brothers more. And so thank you very much for everything you've done for the country. It's amazing that we get to enjoy all these freedoms due to your service. Can you talk about some of the things that you took from either the Army or from your experience there, or from your background before that, that got you into the real estate and also into the private equity world? I'd like to hear more about that.
Absolutely. Right. And it was a real big benefit for me. And I enlisted in the military really as a job to do while I was going through university. And there's all my classmates, some of them are going to working at the mall, folding t-shirts. And I wanted to figure out, I want something else that maybe I can learn, something that would help me later on in life. And I went full service for a little bit when I was trying to figure out, when I graduated, trying to figure out my next move. So it really became a really good safety net. But it still traveled with me till today. I still mention it. And it's been, it's almost been 15 years since I left the military, but it still gives me not only credibility and entrance into different rooms, but it also taught me some core skills that I started teaching other people in finance. And I used it a lot in my pitch as well. So when I first started out, I'm Asian, right? So everybody says you look 10 years younger than I actually am. Well, it was worse when I was in my 20s. So I would go out trying to prospect and trying to bring in money. And then people would tell me, it's like, Ed, you look younger than my kids. And I don't even tell my kids how much money we have. Why would I entrust you to manage money? So I had to think of ways to make myself sound older. So I would tell them, it's like, well, I spent 10 years in the military. I spent 10 years in the Army. And as a military leader, let me tell you the things that you have to be able to accomplish or be able to do before they'll put you in front of troops or leading troops, which is you have to understand the gravity of the decisions that you make. That if I make a choice or I make a decision, it could put people in harm's way. It could hurt them, or it could even kill them. So we take our decisions very, very seriously. And I recognize that I have to be as sharp as I can and continually learn and get better and better and better, because I can never be too safe, or I can never be too accurate at things. So it's always a continuous improvement. When I take a look at your portfolio, I see the same thing. This portfolio represents your life, the blood, sweat, and tears that got you the late nights, time away from your family. That's what I see when I see this portfolio. So I take it with the same level of seriousness. And when I said stuff like that, people was like, wow. It's like, I've never talked to somebody your age that had that kind of attitude when it came to money management. It's like, yeah, because it's lives, it's people's lives here. It's like, we're not fooling around. And that's the level of seriousness I take it when you sign, if you were to sign this and trust it over to me. It's like you're entrusting my life or your life into me, and I was leading you through a patrol. There's a huge responsibility with that.
Yeah. And when you're having these conversations with these potential clients, are you in that moment? I'm sure they're like, wow, all this wisdom coming from this, from this young 20-year-old. How are you able to translate that into the conversations with your family, your marriage, and again, like being a true role model for, in terms of legacy building?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of those discussions would turn into legacy. So a lot of responses I got from things like that. And of course, like I was in my 30s, but I just looked like I was in my 20s. But they would come as like, man, it's like people as your age, I wish more people would have that attitude. It's like, would you talk to my kids? Can you talk to my kids? And I say, go, absolutely. I would totally talk to your kids about finance, about proper health. Like one of the things that we do in money management when it comes to family office, it's a corporate version of what we do for the individual. So when you take on an individual account, we go through a know your client rule or investor statement, IPS. It's an investor policy statement. And it basically sets out what the portfolio or the investment objectives are. Now, when you get to family office and wealth that is over 10 million to 100 million, the IPS turns into a corporate family constitution. And it requires a lot. When you get to that level, it's a lot of psychology. Sales and money management at the high level just turns into psychology, right? And understanding the decisions or why people make the decisions they do, especially under stress. That's the stuff I learned in the military as well. How to make decisions under stress and how to handle and lead people in a stressful environment to make the right decisions as well. I lived through 2008. I was managing money during 2008. I lost $35 million in the course of a couple of weeks. That was a very stressful environment. And it's also leading people through those stressful environments. I couldn't have done it if I didn't have military experience. For me, there was a very heavy pillar to be able to lean on at that time.
Thank you. Yes, that's great. I was actually just making notes here because this is something that I want to review again. So this is gold here. So thank you very much, Edmund. Now, for a self-serving reason, I wanted to ask you a question about, if you're working for a family office, right? Let's say that you're the advisor for a family office. And so you have all these components to it. You have rate of return, you've got personalities, you have legacy at stake, you've got legal document, you have everything, right, that you've got to consider. As a real estate investor, what are you looking for private equity, for acquisitions on properties? What type of criteria do you look for in real estate? Because this is high stakes. And I know that investments always require a match for the people that are investing in them. But what I'd like to hear your take on is what you look for in investments, basically for most of the offices that you work for, or what was some common threads you saw when selecting investments for real estate?
Yeah, absolutely. In money management, the higher net worth you get, the more principal preservation becomes the primary objective. So when you get to family office, all family office manager, the first question they're going to think of or ask is, what's the worst case scenario? And if this completely falls apart, what do we end up with? So that's a reason why, for me, the private equity real estate component of things is a higher percentage than the VC type of IP, like just invest into what's the next tech startup. Because some family offices will want to have in their constitution a little bit of that high growth just for some, just to dabble in it. But that percentage is going to be much smaller than the infrastructure or the PE side of things. So for me, the higher the net worth the family got, the more it starts to look like money management of a large pension plan. In large pension plans, they'll not only have their equity portfolio and their bond portfolio, but they'll also have infrastructure deals. So essentially, they're direct real estate. And some will have even a whole division based on real estate. So the bigger the family office, the more formal that vertical will get. But there'll also be some, like let's just roll the dice on a couple of things. But those are only small little components of that, just to see what happens or to have some fun, right? Some people or some family offices may want to dabble in Bitcoin, but it's probably because one of the younger sons or one of the younger kids are involved in it. A lot of the patriarchs would prefer to have, like, if there's a baby boomer that's still running it, there's probably a big component of real estate involved in that. And that was very confirming for me when I was going and learning from these people and learning from this private equity firm how to invest in real estate. And one of the things that I realized, or I learned when I was working for them, is it's about percentages. It's about asset allocation. It's not about an entire portfolio in real estate. It's about how much do we put into real estate.
Yeah, thank you. That was such a clear, and I'm so curious to ask you more. But also, what I really want to ask you too is, you mentioned your wife being very influential in this whole journey, and I just, I want to hear more about that and the role that she played, and really maybe you can kind of give us a sneak peek on like what does your day-to-day look like?
Absolutely. So as we start to advance in our finance career and in our investment portfolio, she ended up going more back office. So she's more of an introvert, and she's great at execution. She's an associate investment advisor, so she's trained to give investment advice. She just doesn't want to do it. For me, I'm the investor relations guy. I'm the capital raiser, investor relations. And in fact, when we ended up working, when we started at private equity, we're working at not only the same firm, but my team also cleared some of our securities through her office. And she was really servicing us as well. So we work closely together, both in our day job, but then also in our investment strategy. So for me, one of my responsibilities as a investor relations and updating my clients is essentially like running the shareholder meeting. So explaining to them the strategies that we're employing or why we're making the decisions that we're doing. And I realized that in our own portfolio, in our own lives, she's my number one shareholder. I got to get her buy-in first before everything else. And I'm highly trained at that. And so once again, it goes back to, if I can't sell my wife, then we shouldn't be in real estate. The next came into is that if I can't convince her on making the decisions that we're making in investor relations, and if I can't keep my number one shareholder happy, I shouldn't be an investor relations guy. And so I have to really keep her on informed of what I'm doing, and then making sure that she agrees with the decisions that I'm making.
That's great. And what are the routines, or what practices do you do every day, maybe even together or apart? Like, what's important to you guys to keep that rhythm?
I think we're very used to working closely together, and COVID has really brought us back to that, because now she's been working from home for the last like 18 months, and before she was just going into her office, right? So we kept separate. But it was a habit that we picked up when we were working at the firm together. And what ended up happening is we started to blend our lives together. So when we got married, a lot of our clients would say, well, that's a terrible idea. I was like, you don't want to work with your wife. And I kind of looked at them sideways as like, well, I don't know who you married, but I married somebody that I don't mind spending time with, whether it's during work or at home. So, but for me, like, hey, like, you can marry whoever you want. But for me, I don't mind spending a lot of time with her. So what we ended up doing is we ended up getting used to, when we were young, we blended our entire lives. We would talk about personal things at work and work at home. And I thought it was a tremendous advantage for me, not only for me, but also for my clients, because I would wake up like in the middle of the night on Saturday, and everyone's like, oh, did I execute that trade? I can't remember if I executed that trade on Friday. And I just roll over. I was like, hey, did we execute that trade for this client? He's like, yeah, I did it Friday before close. I'm like, okay, great. And then I could relax for the rest of the weekend, right? But if the person that was servicing my team, I can't call her at 3 a.m. on a Saturday. I have to wait. I've been stressing out all weekend, right? So for 10 years when we were working together, it was just, it worked so smoothly, to the point now where even though when we left that firm, we went to separate firms, right? And I kind of missed that, because I really liked working with her as my back office. And when we're at home, though, is that we're just very used to talking about business and talking about personal and just blending it all together. And we've just developed that habit over 20 years. After you've done something for 20 years, you don't even think about it anymore. It just becomes second nature, right? Well, I'll have the same discussion about personal and financial at the same time.
Yeah, that's awesome. I was going to say 20 years. That doesn't look like you. I was going to say, maybe 10 tops, but that's a compliment.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So good share. I think that's really, really good information. What I wanted to do is I wanted to ask you also, Let's just say that there's some people out there that really admire what you're doing, because we definitely do. We really love your perspective on how important it is that everything is done from a spousal or like from a family unit perspective, because we found that that's been the easiest way for success. Because let's put it this way: in real estate investing, most people who get started, they do end up doing buy and holds or something like that. That's easy to do. So they'll get into it. And if you don't have your spouse on board, if things end up going really well, let's say that you buy a property and it ends up cash flowing well, and then you end up selling it for a gain, right? If your spouse wasn't on board with you, first, they're upset that you spent all that time to buy it. But secondly, once you get all that cash out, and let's say you locked it up into a 1031 exchange and your spouse is expecting to go to Disneyland with it, that's a problem at success, right? Even during success. And then the clear downside is if things go wrong, you have to end up putting more money or time into this, then you really don't have your spouse on board with you. That can be even worse, right? So it starts to put a strain on your overall lifestyle in the marriage. So that's why like we're so in tune with you on the fact that whether it's wealth management and the bigger picture with money and finances and budgeting, or it's making investing, or it's just living life in general and making decisions together, it all starts at the family unit level. So anyway, I want to summarize what I was hearing.
Absolutely.
But what I want to ask, anyway, long-winded, statement from me, typical. But I would ask you, what is the first thing, if people wanted to be like you, what is one thing that you can do? Like, what's one phrase, or what's one like idea that sums up the essence of you that people can kind of use as like their true north to get to follow your path?
Yeah, and just quickly to comment on what you just said, I totally agree with you. And one of the things I would like to mention to everybody listening is that when you get into a marriage, did you like, I don't know about you, but when I got into a marriage, what I wanted to do is I wanted to have somebody else to experience life with, the good and the bad. And why black somebody out when it comes to the investment portfolio, which is probably one of the most important decisions that you're making. And for you, it's a journey, right? So both my wife and I, we went through some really hard financial times through 2008. We lived it together. But the thing is, that's what kept us going, is because instead of my wife panicking, it's like, oh, no, I got to handle it. Because I know so many Wall Street guys, it was just like, oh, my wife has no idea what's going on. She thinks she's watching the news and she's freaking out, but she doesn't know. When people do not know, they go immediately to the worst case scenario and they just stress themselves out. And then both of you have tension and you're not on the same page. But for us, it was 2008 was a time that was really strengthening for us in our marriage, because we clung so closely together and said, this is the only way we can go through the storm is by holding closely together. And those are some precious times, like some times I would not choose to go through again, but they were also some precious times that we really brought us together. So I would encourage people, it's just like walk at the journey together and keep everybody informed. The more informed people are, the less panic people get. I've talked to couples where the wife will pull me aside. It's like, I have no idea what my husband is doing. I'm freaked out. It's like, are we going to be okay? Are we going to be safe? It's like, why doesn't your husband talk to you? So I had to talk to her on his behalf to calm her down. It's like, no, the risk that we're taking is calculated. Here's the reasons why. And then she would calm down. And it's like, well, why don't you tell her those things? Because that's your wife. I'm not her husband. Okay. I'm not your husband. It should be your husband telling you these things. And then I would encourage them and get them to do that. And I think to answer your question, the underlying thing that I have in my life is the core, one of the core values I have is a Zig Ziglar line, which is you can have everything you want in life if you help just enough other people get what they want in life. And it's an important thing that I teach people in sales, which is you have to have an empathetic attitude. It's not about, I will need to pay my mortgage. I want to make, I want to be able to make a commission this month. It's more about everybody's on a journey to somewhere. And if I help people and genuinely care about the journey that they're going to go on, then we all become successful together. So today I've left the industry, as we mentioned at the beginning. I don't have licenses anymore. I don't manage money anymore. What I do is I manage our own portfolio now. And so I've essentially learned what I originally set out to learn 20 years later. So now I manage our own money, but on the side, what I do is I coach people on how to manage a real estate portfolio, how to attract investors, how to do investor to relations, and how to find clients. That's what I do now.
Great. Thank you. Good stuff. Did you want to ask?
Yeah,
anything?
I was just, I think you summed it up so well. What I heard is like, when tough times come, huddle closer, a lot of couples separate. And this is, you don't have to answer this, but how many marriages do you think you saved throughout your career?
Good question.
I don't know, like, because I think that starts to become, for me, it's just like, I can't take credit for that. But I think my intent is I'd rather try to contribute to making marriages better and then just forgetting about it. And I'll get credit some other way in life. But for me, at least I can sleep at night knowing that at least I tried to make things better. And I try to encourage people to make things. And that's another reason why I'm here. It's because I truly believe that, the 50% is a terrible number across America for success rates of marriages. And then I realized, what's the number one cause? If the number one cause is finance, well, I got 20 years experience in finance. Why can't I throw my, a couple of drops in the bucket to try to move that needle in the right direction?
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Well, Edmund, this has been a wealth of information, no pun intended, for our audience, for us. Taken away a lot here and just gotten closer to the concept that money and wealth management is really more spiritual and relationship than we all think, right? It's very much that, because as you alluded to before, it's people's hard-earned money, right? So it's someone that pour energy and sweat and blood and tears into, and they're trying to do the best they can to try to multiply that so that later on they can preserve that for their generations and for their family. And I think that having that tie together with relationships and wealth management, I think it's just a perfect thing. And I really enjoyed this conversation. This is great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really excited to share all of your wisdom with.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's too bad that you're not in business anymore. I guess we wouldn't be talking about it, but because we'd love to refer your service.
Yeah, I can't. So once again, I have to throw a huge disclaimer because there's going to be all these lawyers and these regulators. Like, yeah. I am not prospecting. I'm not representing any firm. I don't have a license anymore, and I don't manage money. I'm not looking for clients. The only thing I'm doing is, like, if people want to get coached on how to run a syndication, sure, I can do that, but it's nothing to do with license. I'm not looking for investors.
Excellent. Yeah,
I can't take any investors.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Okay, Edmund, we're going to head into what we call the rapid round part of the show. It's we ask everyone the same 5 questions. And so we're curious to rapidly throw them at you right now and get some rapid answers. Okay.
All right.
Are you ready to go?
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Yeah. So first question is, what book has had the biggest impact on you and why, outside of Rich Dad?
What has been the biggest impact? Ooh, that's a good one. I guess one of the biggest impacts is just maybe the Bible. The Bible is really important. So it's having a moral foundation.
Cool.
Awesome. And if people wanted to emulate your success, what is the first actionable thing that they can do?
The number one thing you can do is read. So many people don't read. And there's a really good quote by Earl Nightingale is, if you spend an extra hour every day in the study of your trade, you will be a national expert within 3 years or less.
Gotcha. And what small thing do most people not know about you?
Most people don't know that my background is in theater. So I did some Broadway productions. I worked on a lot of workshops, and some of them even went to win Tony Awards. So I'm a theater guy.
Cool.
So cool. Wow.
Cool.
How do you like to unwind and restore your creative juices individually?
I like to do a lot of creative things. So I'm more on the creative side. So a right brain thinker, and has really been it's really been helpful for me in a very technical environment. So for me, I do things like painting and take a look at any kind of things that are artistic.
Nice. And what is your favorite family vacation spot?
Hawaii.
Which island?
We honeymooned in Lanai, and I like the other islands as well. Lanai's kind of great because it's less city. But the best part I like about Hawaii is that my wife and I, we both look local. People thought we were locals, and it's a tropical area. That's why I like it.
Yeah.
That's so cool. All right. Well, cool. Thank you so much, Edmund. It's been great having you on the show. What I would like to do is just give you the baton and see how people can reach out to you, or how you'd like the listeners to interact with you. So I'll just give you an open mic right now to talk about you and how we can learn more about Edmund.
Thank you. So the best thing to do to reach out to me is reach out on LinkedIn. So it's EdmundChien. And then you just find me there. I do post quite a lot about different little nuggets of things that I've learned over time or things I'm continually learning. Interestingly enough, if you're Asian, my last name Chien, my last name is actually the Chinese character for money. So if you take
Wow.
money in Chinese, that's literally my last name. So it's a vocational last name. And my ancestors were all financial professionals. So I'm actually doing what my blood is, has come out to do or has set out to do.
That is interesting. That's
story.
very cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So when you brand yourself on your, on social media or on website, if you wanted to get one, I think I know what your logo is going to be. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. I don't push it that much. But it's just like an interesting thing to learn.
That is super
That's
cool. Yeah, very, very cool. Well, Edmund, thank you so much for coming on the show. And for all the listeners who listened all the way to the end, we hope that you've taken a lot away from this. And we really hope that you enjoyed everything that we've talked about today. There's a lot of stuff to cover, and definitely Edmund brought the goods. So please reach out to Edmund if you want to learn more. Link up with him on LinkedIn to learn more about what he does. And then also, if you like the show, if you like the Elevate Your Equity show, please comment, like, subscribe, or wherever you're consuming this content, just engage with us because we want to hear more about you guys, get feedback, and get even better. So, and we also want exposure to more individuals so that more people can get access to this incredible content that Edmund just gave us. So unless you have anything else you want to mention.
No, this has been great. Yeah.
It's been a great show. All right, cool. Well, Edmund, thank you for coming on. And this is Derek.
And this is Sophie.
We are signing off. Take care, everyone.